The Wild West he knew, lived, and roamed was gone. Civilization had ruined its untamed beauty with bankers, speculators, and worst of all, authority. Yet Paris had the kind of civilization that reminded him of the Wild West. From the slow amblings of the Seine and the stone bridges that tiptoed across its deep waters to the rocky mesas of Notre Dame and the Arc de Triomphe, the city had molded a people that lit the world with a gay and romantic civilization. Paris was a new frontier for him, a new challenge, a new home, and now that the Germans had gone and dragged dirt all over the carpet. "I don't fancy New York City," Catfish said. "I already bought a grave in Montparnasse. I reckon they don't give refunds. Besides, holes in the ground are going to be going for a high premium pretty soon. I got to stay and look out for my investment." "I'm sure the coffin makers are doing brisk business," Hiccup said. "If I were a young man, I would stand and fight." The Frenchman wiped a tear from his eye. "I was your age when I defended France," Catfish said. "Of course, I wasn't as round or fatalistic." Hiccup knew the story, but held his peace out of respect. During the Battle of Belleau Wood, Catfish and Lee English, his old outlaw partner from their Wild West days, rode up to the front lines to do some scouting for General Blackjack Pershing. Somewhere in all that death, blood, and fire, Catfish lost his pard, a pain that never left him. "Pétain is forming a government in Vichy," Hiccup said. "Maybe he can restore France's honor." "The only one that can restore France's honor is France. And I'm not talking about government or politicians," Catfish said. "It's the people that make a country and the land that shapes them. At least that's the way it is where I come from." Catfish took another sip of his coffee. "You see, it doesn't take a nobleman or a man of character to restore honor to the land. It just takes ordinary people." "You sound like a communist," Hiccup said. "Well, I don't cotton to any political ideology. Any form of consolidated power is bound to go wrong." "Ah, now you sound like an anarchist." "I've lived by the gun long enough to know that the best way to stay alive is to keep away from death, who's always looking for you. That's the only law you need to learn." Hiccup gave a smile. The old cowboy had a way of speaking that made even a man about to get his neck stretched feel at ease with the world. He almost believed that as long as Catfish was around, nothing bad could happen. But unless thousands of cowboys rode into Paris, France didn't stand a chance of freeing herself from the Nazi grip. A rumble shook the parlor, causing the coffee to ripple and spill on the lace tablecloth. "My God," Catfish said, "if I didn't know this was Paris, I'd swear we're in the middle of a 10,000-head stampede." His eyes were still on the door, and his right hand rested on the edge of the table. Hiccup looked outside and saw the muzzle of a tank round a corner and roll up the street. "Looks like we better go out and surrender," Catfish said. The Panzer rumbled past the hotel, shaking the table and rattling the windows. Soon 12 soldiers marched past the window, their rifles and submachine guns at the ready. One peered in the window at Catfish. The old cowboy's right hand eased down to his thigh, disappearing under the table. The soldier, a young boy whose helmet looked like a stew pot on a cherry, decided that a funny-looking old man and a fat one were no threat. He quickened his pace and rejoined his comrades. Catfish's hand went back onto the table. "They're just boys," Hiccup said, watching the troopers as they made their way down the street. "You'd be surprised at what boys can do," Catfish said. The old cowboy's soft blue eyes burned hard like a cobalt. It was a look Hiccup had seen during the Great War and once recently. A French army officer had made Catfish the butt of one too many jokes. He challenged the old cowboy to a shooting contest, stating that no one could shoot the center of a playing card at 50 yards, calling Catfish a liar. Those baby blue eyes turned hard as the steel of his Colt .45 Peacemaker, and Catfish fired off a shot that blew a hole in the center of the card. He promised that next time he'd place that card on the officer's forehead. Catfish eased his chair back and got up from the table. He took off his hat and swept his long, silvery hair back with his hand, then placed his hat back on, pulling it low and snug on his wrinkled brow. With the same hand, he swept back his duster to pull out a coin from his vest pocket. Hanging low on his right hip were his peacemaker and a gun belt full of cartridges. "Are you a fool? Where are you going armed, other than your grave?" Hiccup got up from his seat. He knew the old cowboy had his pride, but didn't suspect it would make him suicidal. "The Boche will shoot you down like a dog." "Well, dogs bite back," Catfish said, "especially old ones." Catfish smiled and stuck out his hand to Hiccup. "I guess I got a bad habit of defending France. If I ain't back by dusk, get out by dawn. See you along the trail, pard." Hiccup took Catfish's hand but didn't smile back. He wanted to tell Catfish to be careful, but he might as well try and tell the sun to stop shining. Catfish walked out the door. It was as pretty a day as there ever was in Paris. It reminded him of the summer of 1906, when he first passed through the streets of the City of Lights with Brazos Billy's Wild West show. He rode down the Grand Champs-Élysées with the same hat on his head and the same gun on his hip that he wore this summer day almost 30 years later. Catfish ached for a horse. It just didn't seem proper to walk to a fight, but he would have to make do.
Welcome back to the Strange West podcast. And once again, this is Trent Tano, and you've been listening to Chapter 1 of Paris High Noon. I'd also like to thank the talented James K. Doyle for lending his voice to this podcast. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Tim Sweeney and Jay Shaw, whose suggestions on making a podcast for Paris High Noon was what finally made me pull the trigger on this project. If you want to find out more about Paris High Noon and to get a copy for yourself, go to ParisHighNoon.com. For your Cowboy vs. Nazi fix, go to ParisHighNoon.com. And taking us out is the same Magic Man, Mitch Polzak, and the Royal Deuces with their rendition of Ennio Morricone's For a Few Dollars More. Thank you for listening, and come back next week for Chapter 2 of Paris High Noon on the Strange West podcast. This is Trent Tano wishing you happy trails.